I was involved in the tsunami relief, and I had long service leave, and I volunteered to go back as a pediatrician to work anywhere. I was originally going to work in Bataclan, but the organisation received a request for a pediatrician to teach what were described as medical students in Kilinochie. So it didn't make any difference to me, and I went to Kilinochie, and as it turns out, the students, there were 32 of them, comprised the medical wing of the Tamil Tigers. Medical practitioners is a strange name for them. They had in fact been running surgical units in the various clashes. They'd been looking after people with cholera and all sorts of other diseases, so they're very experienced people. To finish their medical degree, they needed a course on pediatrics, so I came and extended that 2 weeks for 3 months when we did some research projects and other things.
So what sort of qualifications? You mean Sri Lankan qualifications?
Well, in 1992, Prabhakaran realised that they were very vulnerable without their own doctors. Until that stage, they were sending casualties in fishing boats across to Tamil Nadu, where they had sympathisers, and they were using the teaching hospital in Jaffna. So they thought they would probably lose access to that, as they did. So in 92, he decided they needed their own medical wing, and indeed the commanders were asked to identify people who would make good doctors from the ranks of the army, and a number of these had finished college degrees, but in fact some of them hadn't even finished their high school. So they started with 75 students, and they began a curriculum in parallel with the curriculum in the established medical school in Jaffna. It ran for about 2 years, and then with the clashes increasing at various stages, then the students were assigned to what became field hospitals as the whole of the medical apparatus of the Tigers matured. And when the war would settle down, they got on with their theoretical studies and other things. So I happened upon them many years after they had first started, and I was just happened to fill that hiatus of formal pediatric teaching. Now, they call themselves the Medical College of Tamil Eelam, and of course it's not recognised by the government in Colombo.
Do you think that the qualifications are equivalent?
Oh yes, yes, in many ways these people had reached the stage of doing end-to-end arterial anastomoses under torchlight with essentially imperfect anesthesia during bombardments from artillery, with the shrapnel hitting their compound. Now that is quite sophisticated surgery under those circumstances. The whole medical apparatus developed from essentially a band-aid approach to their casualties, trying to keep them alive and putting them in a boat and taking them to Tamil Nadu, to a really sophisticated 4-stage series of handling of casualties, from when somebody's hit, passed back 50 or 70 metres to people behind, and then to a 3rd-stage hospital, and to a 4th-stage hospital. In the midst of this, they developed battlefield blood transfusions, which the Sri Lankan army does not have even now, and the reconstructive surgery, and the whole thing is a really fascinating story. This is not a little group of guerrillas, wandering around the jungle. This was a very sophisticated medical apparatus that kept many, many people alive who would have otherwise died. And they're doing that right now, I have no doubts about it.
What was the organisation that you dealt with that actually got you across the line into the Tiger-controlled areas?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell you that, because 3 to 5 Tamils every day of every week disappear in white vans, never to be seen again. the human rights abuses by the government in Colombo ought to be known by Australians, but they're not. And I have no wish to tell you who I was associated with because of the extremely serious risk to their life. Even more Tamils these days, I hear reliably that even more Tamils are being rounded up in the middle of the night in Colombo and other places and are suffering all kinds of abuses. It's a very, very dreadful situation.
But you're still in touch with people in the tiger-controlled areas at this stage?
No, indirectly. I only hear. Until Kilinochchi fell, they were able to send out, they could use satellite phones, and it was not that difficult to talk to people. But now, with their moving back to taking refuge in the jungles and stuff, I don't think anyone's got much contact with them, and I certainly don't.
When you went into the tiger-controlled areas, you must have been aware that they were listed by the United Nations and others as a terrorist group. What did you feel about that?
Well, at that stage there was a ceasefire, which had started in 2002, and I was with a recognised international aid organisation, and I was going to teach medical students, in inverted commas, how to look after sick children. It wasn't until I was with them for 2 or 3 weeks that I learned of who they were. And I made a studied decision, as indeed I've discussed with the federal police in this country. I made a decision to stay because I was teaching them how to look after sick children.
How come you were